Hey everyone, John Doyle from OptixEQ, and I got a special guest with me. He's the owner, founder, Donegal Racing, and also champion Belmont Stakes winner, Mo Donegal, Jerry Crawford. Jerry, welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you, John, and thank you for all of the help you gave us from there to here.
Yeah. Hey, that's the other great thing about him. He's actually an Optix client, so that's another great feature about him.
Yeah. So, John, I need to tell people I'm a paying client.
That's right. That's
in
right.
Other words,
right.
this is no BS. This is my take.
That's correct. So, no, I mean, Jerry, come on, take us through what it must have been like winning a Triple Crown. I know you've been close. You had some really nice horses over the years, but this has to be like the ultimate, winning a race like this.
Well, it is the ultimate. Although I'll tell you, in 2015, when Keen Ice won the Travers over American Pharoah, I said to myself, well, unlikely I'll ever win a bigger race than that, especially in New York. And then, of course, Saturday, we won the Belmont Stakes. So it's just been a roller coaster ride. I can't say enough for the partners of Donegal Racing and the wonderful support they've provided, and the fraternal nature of the organization. People have developed great friendships, and so that's all been good. And then to have this special horse, you kind of feel like they're entrusted to you,
right?
And we've certainly felt that way about Mo Donegal for a long time now. I'll just one other quick thing, and then I'll let you ask another question. From last August of 2021 through today, every single time the horse has breezed, I've called Todd, and Todd has said, really good breeze. In other words, not once in that entire stretch of time did this horse do anything other than give us a great effort. And I've never had a horse like that. I've never had a horse where the trainer could honestly say every single week, another great breeze. But it's fair to say that we've developed a little fondness, I guess you could say.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's just been so consistent, right? I mean, it's just been amazing. And that was one other question. How did he come out of the race? I mean, how do you feel? How was he coming out of the race? Too soon to tell, or what?
Yeah, probably. I always say that first inkling you get is when you have the first breeze back. And obviously we're not going to be rushing into a first breeze back scenario. But I don't think we'll know much until then. I can tell you this, and people who were there or watching closely probably saw this. He wasn't breathing hard when he came back from winning the Belmont Stakes. I mean, how can that be, right? I mean, several of the other horses, without naming names, were tied up and washed out and heaving and almost stumbling at the end of the race. And he was just standing. He was standing there. I took him for the walk out on the track, which is my favorite thing in all of racing, because it's really a neat moment to see what they have, their own ways of communicating, and to see what the horse is going to tell you. And he was just like, yeah, whatever. What are we going to do? And then we took him into the winner's circle through walls of people who were screaming, and he just was like checking it out, taking it all in. That's how cool the customer is.
I think he was truly the only mile-and-a-half horse in the race, to be honest. I mean, and again, it goes back. I mean, early watching him early in his career, kind of pegged him in his second race as being a marathon type horse. So you'll see it in our notes when I show it. Just kind of looked like one of those horses that could run all day. And one of the things he got pegged, I thought, incorrectly during the whole Triple Crown thing, is a deep closer. I mean, he could, right? I think he's a great finisher and the best finisher in his age group, but not necessarily a deep closer. He, like we've talked before, he kind of puts himself in position where he needs to be. And in fact, if the pace is actually average to slow, he's actually in better shape, because he could sit, mid-pack, maybe even closer. And then if he's within 3 lanes at the top of the stretch, he's going to win, basically, right? If everything's right with him. And so I think he got kind of pegged as this deep closer, kind of like Rich Strike. And, it was funny, I was thinking about Rich Strike a little bit, It was Doulahan's. I mean, no, actually, it was Keen Ice's sire, right? You talked about Keen Ice. That was his sire. That was kind of interesting, ironic a little bit there.
Correct. It is pretty cool. And it was pretty cool going into the Derby and coming out of the Derby to have been able to pick both Keen Ice and Mo Donegal. I mean, and then have the Keen Ice progeny run against Mo Donegal, although it's not the way I would have wanted it to turn out. Speaking of wanting things to turn out, and I'm really trying hard today not to say what if, but the the trip we got in the Derby, just give us an average trip, and we might be having a even more spectacular conversation today than the one we are.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing about him, the one thing I thought too is that I thought his Wood Memorial was such a really good race. Really much better than a lot of people did. First of all, he took kickback in that race. The track that day was playing more to speed, and he ran down a really good horse who came back and won the Preakness, right? I just think, I think possibly too, could have been possibly he regressed a little bit off of that race too. I just thought it was such a super effort. I think it was so much better than most people thought it was.
That was one of the reasons I was convinced we would win the Derby with this horse, because his race in the Wood was, and by the way, if they don't make that a grade 1 next year, shame on them. But that's beside the point. I was there all day Friday and all day Saturday of Wood weekend at Aqueduct. Not one horse, not one in 2 days closed against the front. And right. He closed and won by 10 lengths, beating the horse that won the Preakness, as you mentioned. Right. I mean, I thought he might be any kind of horse that day when he did what he did. So yeah, you're absolutely right about the bias.
Yeah, it was that, and he took dirt in that race, and I'm big on kickback. That really affects horses, and just seemed like he was able to do that. And I was like really confident going to Derby. But again, the only concern about the Derby was the field size and obviously the coming back off such a big race. We're looking at the plot. I saw you in the post race interview, you seemed very confident. You said you were very confident going into the race. You thought you would win. And what gave you that kind of feeling? I looked at the plot, and the first thing I said is, wow. I mean, he's the number 6 on this plot. We're looking at it. And, again, he's not a deep closer. He looks like he's going to be a closer up, and he's just got this dominant square. And the other square in this race was Nest. They just kind of laid over the field on the plot, and that's kind of the way they ran. But what gave you the confidence going into the race that you said you had?
Well, I knew that the Derby was not indicative of what he was capable of. And I focused, I looked 1,000 times, I looked at these plots and just said, this is just Mo and Nest all day long.
Yeah.
And the reason the exacta paid so poorly was because I told all of the hundreds of Donegal partners to bet that exacta. But those are the reasons that I had the confidence I did. Plus, you talk to your trainer every day, you find sure. out how's the horse doing, and I knew the horse was doing well. So we were very confident.
Oh, that's cool. I'm just looking at his form here. This is his past races with our grid and notes, Jerry, and even going back to the Holy Bull, I thought that was a dynamite race for him. I just thought he didn't get the right kind of race setup, but he probably needed the race a little bit too. But I thought he really closed really well. Another race I thought he was kind of underrated in. The one thing I did notice though in the Belmont, I want to get your feedback on it. He got a good trip. Let's face it, he got a good covered up trip, but he won easily, like you said. He wasn't blowing hard, and they came home pretty fast. But what was going on with the drifting in deep stretch? It looked like he really drifted out. And I thought maybe, and Emily and I talked about it, she had mentioned he's never been in front by himself like that. So maybe it was like he just lost focus and lost where he was. And I was just curious what you guys thought about that.
So one of the things that we thought about it, Irad looked back a couple of times like where are they? And it almost seemed like the horse had a sense of it as well. And I think that contributed to a little of that back and forth. I was going to mention your OFIGs because Mo had run a 107, and I don't think anybody else had run a number that quick. So that was another thing I remember that we talked about just as we look at your product. That difference to us too.
Yeah, sometimes like the numbers, like sometimes our numbers are good and somebody else's is not bad. But I know the buyer came back slow for that Wood Memorial. And I think that's maybe some of this negative on this horse. So we were a much better number than I guess the buyer number. But I think we were closer with some of the other numbers out there, with, representing that race. So it was interesting. Yeah.
I'm starting to get some of the other numbers now. Is it okay if we mention them by name or?
Yeah.
I think the tentative number, Ragozin number, is going to be somewhere around 6.5.
Okay.
But all of you take longer on these key races.
Yeah.
And make adjustments. He ran a very, very fast number on time form. And so I think that as these speed ratings get finished up, they're going to reflect favorably on Mo.
Yeah, we're still working on that. It's always difficult, I think, with these 1.5 mile races because they're so infrequent. It's hard to make a variant for him. But just the way he finished, I thought that he finished up really strong, and that's important in these races. The other thing is so I saw it was mentioned that I guess the Travis is the next step. Is that right?
Yeah. So I'm a big believer, and I know Todd is too, in letting the horse tell us.
Yes.
And this horse obviously enjoyed having 5 weeks off from the Derby trip to the stakes on Saturday. And so I don't think we have to run between now and the Travers. I think there's a pretty good chance we wouldn't. If we did run, even though it's a smaller purse, I think we'd probably run at Jim Dandy and just stay put there.
Yeah.
But we'll only do that if the horse is acting like he needs to run. Otherwise, why be in a hurry? The race that matters is the Travers, not the others.
But you could really say his best race ever was the Wood. I mean, obviously the Belmont, but I'm just saying, numbers wise was the Wood, and that was off this similar layoff, 63-day layoff. So, he can do it. And I thought that was kind of a ballsy move by you guys. Now, skipping the fountain, which was the right thing to do. But I think it showed you confidence in the horse, right? Because it was really, there was so many people with points this year, right? It was just ridiculous.
Yeah. Well,
it took some guts.
I'll tell you this: you call it ballsy, I call it potentially homicide. Because my partners were like, "What do you mean we're not going to run and get more points? Why wouldn't we get more points?" And I would say, "Well, look, I think we're going to do just fine in the Wood, and we won't have to worry about points after that." Yeah, but what if Irad falls off the horse, or Joel, as it turned out in the final analysis? And I'm like, well, then I have to take it out of my hide, I guess. But ballsy. That's fair. That's very fair.
No, definitely. So you've owned this horse now. There was a change in ownership. Well, not change. You sold a share to Rapoli. What happened there? How did that transpire?
So Mike bought 25% of the horse, and one of the conditions, and this has been the subject of a lot of kickback of its own. One of the conditions was that he would get to wear his silks in his hometown of New York at the Belmont Stakes. And one thing about Mike Rapoli, he's not conservative in the way he spends his money. And right. This is a hard business to survive in financially.
Sure.
And his offer made economic sense for Donegal. and it made emotional sense for Rapoli. And he will get to use his silks one race out of every four. And it's funny, I think silks and naming horses are the two things that break up more partnerships than anything. That may sound ridiculous, but I promise you it's the truth.
Oh, I bet.
So anyway, that's how the Rapoli deal came to pass. He's of course a permanent client of Todd Pletcher's. Todd thought it would be a good partnership, and we both bring huge crowds. We brought over 200 to the Belmont Stakes. He brought 80.
Yeah.
And so I like to think we're good for the sport from the standpoint of participation.
No, that's good. Being a New Yorker, ex-New Yorker, I understand how those guys tick, what makes them tick and stuff. So good for you. I'm glad. I mean, the most important thing is the horse. You know, in this situation, everyone went for the ride, and it looks like it makes probably a good business decision for you. So good for you. Now,
yeah.
So how'd you get involved in this ownership thing? And what would your advice would be other people that want to own? What's some advice you would give them?
So that's a really good question. It's one I've thought about a lot because occasionally I get asked to visit with folks about it. I would say that you need to learn all you can about the business, even if, and this is likely the case, you're going to have somebody else help run it for you. Sheikh Mohammed says in his book that until you get to a point where the person you trust to make decisions in the horse racing business is the person who watches you shave every morning, until you get to that point, you probably shouldn't be in the business. And he's absolutely right. There are more ways to have things go wrong in this business, some purposely, some not, that you really have to be able to defend yourself. And the only way you can defend yourself is knowledge.
Right.
And so it's certainly something I've worked really hard on, particularly horse selection. My son Connor helps with the genetic side. He and I that's how we got started. Do you want me to just tell you very quickly how that all came down?
Absolutely.
So my son and I and a couple of our buddies, we couldn't figure out why we always got our asses kicked when we bet on the Kentucky Derby. It seemed like one long shot after another would come in. And so Connor and I started fiddling around with algorithms, trying to determine whether we could come up with some kind of a mathematical formula that would help us pick the winner of the Kentucky Derby. And what we decided after 4 years was we couldn't. It didn't work. But what it did do was it kicked out numbers that showed us who couldn't win the Kentucky Derby. So instead of picking 1 out of 20 horses, you could maybe pick 1 out of 4 horses, and obviously your chances of being successful. And I remember we were staying on Phillips Lane across from the airport in Louisville every year for the Derby, and the TVG guys were there. And every year I'd have this handout that I'd prepared of which horses can't win the Kentucky Derby, and they were fascinated by it. And so things got better from a wagering standpoint. And I said to my wife Linda, I'm going to take $200,000 to Lexington to the yearling sale, and I'm going to buy a horse that fits our algorithm. So I went down. It's the fall of 2008. Everybody remembers what happened in the fall of 2008. The market collapsed.
Sure. Yeah.
When the market collapses, people stop buying boats. They stop buying diamonds. They stop buying racehorses. And so I had gone down with $200,000 to buy a horse, and I ended up buying 8 horses for $410,000. One of those horses was Patio Prado, who went on to finish 3rd in the Kentucky Derby. But anyway, I'm flying home deep in the middle of figuring out how I'm going to avoid alimony when I tell Linda that I bought 8 horses. But honest, honey, they only cost $410,000.
I got value.
Yeah, they got value. And I had a bunch of friends in Des Moines. By a bunch, I mean like 8 or 9. And they'd long said, buy a horse, we'll all be partners in it. I'm thinking to myself, I hope they weren't kidding. But they weren't, when we put the group together, we had 8 people from Des Moines and 1 lawyer, Joe Savage from Boston, who's still with us. And that was how Donegal Racing got started. And we were very successful. We've been in the Kentucky Derby 4 times. We clearly focus on classics, classic distances, classic races. And our folks have loved doing it that way. Now we have 54 partners, by the way.
Wow. So what a success story. And so how'd you learn about us, Optics? What brought you to us, and what was that all about?
So that's a great story. We're at the Derby. Would it have been 2 years ago? Does that make sense? Or 3? I forget. Yeah. In any event, Frank Severino, who's a lawyer in Des Moines, said that he had been listening to some podcasts and of course, we didn't know you, but he'd been listening to some podcasts that you were on and that Emily was on, and we're sitting close to a television at Churchill Downs on one of the days of preliminary racing, and he said, "Oh, Emily likes such and such a horse in this race," and the horse was literally 28-1, and we're all like, "Yeah, whatever." And none of it, you can hear that all day long, right?
Right,
but
sure.
Can't see all day long is that 28-1 horse romping, which it did. So all of a sudden we're like, okay, who does your friend like in the next race? So Emily got things rolling and off to a quick start. Then we all discovered that Emily lives in the same apartment building as Frank Severino, who I just talked about. His son Ben, who is a horse phenom in his own right. They walk their dogs together. So Ben actually introduced us to Emily, and then both of you, we asked if you could do seminars for us, and you were very kind to do that. And I think we've introduced a lot of people to,
Yes.
I was about maybe 40 years ago, I was the 3rd Iowan to ever use the Ragozin sheets. I don't know that I was 3rd with Optics, but up there a ways, at least.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great story, and we appreciate your business and support, and it's great.
Well, the product, look, I talked to somebody who, like your own self, has won the National Handicapping Championship, and Michael Baychuk, who I'm sure you know.
Sure.
And Michael, I said to him, "Are you using Optics?" He said, "I am now." He just talked about how much easier and quicker it was for him to process information. So yeah, you've deservedly, you've earned a lot of fans of your product.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, what we try to do is do something more visual, because it could be a grind, going through and some of the information out there. Try to bring something more light, more visual, something you can get kind of synthesize a lot of information in one place. So that's the whole idea about the plot and the notes and stuff. So this has really been, I appreciate all the time you give us here, and I just hope Mo Donegal. Now, do you really have, is the classic in mind, at least for the end of the year?
Oh, sure. I mean, but if we could design a perfect campaign, we'd go to the Travers next, and then we go to the Breeders' Cup after that. That would be perfect. Great spacing and an opportunity for resting up after. But these things, you can have all the plans that you want. They don't often work out exactly as.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting classic. It depends on a lot where people go. I know you saw Flightline while you were there. What was your thought about him? Because I was thinking, why would, unless there's physical issues with him, I don't know why they wouldn't try the classic with him too.
I was just going to look. Look, I think that we've figured out that Flightline and Jack Christopher are great sprinters, right? And I consider a sprint to be a mile and a 16th or shorter.
Okay.
Some people would have a different definition. And maybe they can stretch, but at least at this point they haven't to any kind of a classic distance. And we saw with We the People last Saturday how difficult it is to carry that front end speed long distances. So
yeah, I wouldn't put him in the same near categories. I mean, I don't put anyone in the category of Flightline. I don't put Jack Christopher or anybody else. I just think he's kind of a unique horse, an exciting horse. I haven't seen a horse like that since Frankel, when Frankel first started. Now, Frankel was a horse that, you know, they had to stretch out too. He's kind of a horse that looked like he didn't want to go long. He ended up going long. Flightline to me doesn't look like a sprinter. He's longer.
And he's bred to go longer.
Yeah, so I just think it may be more physical with him, you know, because he's only run 4 times, so there's got to be something. Something's got to be up. Right? Yeah. But no, I mean, I think if Mo Donegal continues to progress and doesn't really have to progress that much, he's definitely a contender. And if he can get the Belmont, the Travers, and the Breeders' Cup Classic, I think he got Horse of the Year, right? So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, exciting times for Donegal. Anything else? Any new horses on the horizon for you guys? I mean, anything new?
We're very excited about 2-year-olds, but so is every other person in the country who owns one. So you have to keep that in mind.
Are you going to have any debuts soon, Saratoga or? Yeah,
we actually have an Into Mischief colt who is the size of a medium dog. I mean, he's really a tiny specimen, but I loved him at the sale for 2 reasons. While he was, and I'm maybe exaggerating a little on his size, but while he was small, he was put together perfectly. In other words, everything conformed from a size standpoint, and I really liked him. I didn't know if you could get much out of him given his size. And then I was able to buy him for $90,000, which always makes him more attractive, right?
Sure.
But lo and behold, Todd's foreman up at Saratoga, Tristan Berry, says he's the best in the class. So we know he's fast, we know he's quick, we know he's early. So I think you can watch for Donegal Mischief, and he's going to do well his first out, which will be early at Saratoga.
That's cool. Oh yeah, by the way, I mean, you know, you mentioned Todd Fletcher. I mean, that guy's just a class act. I met him once at the Eclipse Awards when I was there to receive my Eclipse, and I got to talking to him, and he gave me a lot of time. And he's just, I mean, he's just what you see on TV and every interview I've seen with him and in person. He just holds himself with a lot of class. He just seems to be a total class act, and obviously a great trainer. And to me, it seems like over like maybe the last 5 to 7 years, he's kind of changed the way he trains horses. He's much more geared to those classic and distance. You know, he's done really well on with some turf horses stretching out. And, you know, he used to have much more precocious kind of horses. He kind of evolved from that Lucas thing to his own thing over the last 5 to 7 years. Do you think so?
Yeah, I agree with you completely. He is a class act. He runs just an amazing operation. He's everything you could want, not just in a trainer, but he could do anything. He could run for governor. We might have to chat with him just a little on his politics, but he's a tremendous guy. We work exclusively with he and Brad Cox.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And as different as they are, they're mostly alike.
Yeah.
You know, I've noticed one thing about good trainers, and I could name some others that I've noticed this about. They literally have photographic memories, and that's a big plus when you're trying to manage a couple hundred horses. It's stunning how Brad and Todd can tell you down every little nuance from when they looked at your horse earlier in the day. And so they certainly both have that quality.
Yeah, I guess a lot of successful people have certain qualities that are kind of common, no matter what their profession is. You know, that's one I kind of find to be the case. Good trainers, good coaches. You know, seem to have that kind of, they could recall plays like a Tom Brady, could recall probably plays from, 20 years ago, like it was
Yeah.
yesterday, right? So, well, Jerry, thanks a lot for visiting with us. I appreciate your support and look forward to great things for Mo Donegal and Donegal Racing in the future.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity. Tell Emily to get better soon.
I will.
Okay.